Hey, it's Mark Leonard with your video thought for the day. Okay, before I do anything else, I beg you, I plead with you. Please watch this to the end. Please pay attention to this one. This one is really notable to me. On April 3rd, 1968, Martin Luther King spoke in Memphis, Tennessee, in support of a sanitation strike. And he started his speech out asking, in a sense, publicly a question. He said, if God had placed Martin Luther King Jr. on Creation Day, right there at the beginning of the world, and said, you, Dr. King, can choose any point in time you wish to live. He says, you know what I'd have done? And he recounted all of these different times of history. He talked about the significance of being maybe at the time where Moses gets the people liberated out of Israel, takes them through the wilderness, gets them to the lip of the promised land, or the occupation of the promised land. He says, but I wouldn't stop there. That's not where I'd have God place me. And he walks through the times and the eras of Greek prominence with Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and Aristophanes and other great Athenians who brought important ideas to the forefront and really advanced thinking and Western thought. He says, but that's not where I'd have him stop me. And he talked about even the life of Jesus, gave a great recounting of the story of the Good Samaritan on the road to Jericho. But he says, that's not where I'd have him stop me. He says, I could even go into the great days of the Roman Empire, but that's not where he'd stop. I could go to his namesake, Martin Luther King the First, in a sense, nailing on the Wittenberg door those theses. He says, but that's not where I would stop. He said, I wouldn't stop when Abraham Lincoln was vacillating on whether or not to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. I wouldn't stop when in the 1930s, America's on the verge of bankruptcy. And that great President Roosevelt said that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He said, I would ask the Lord not to let me stop until the midpoint in the second half of the 20th century. And he starts his speech with this profound recognition of how important it is to be there at this point in time, fighting for equality, and how important that equality is. As he walks through that, he walked through with that story of the Good Samaritan, where the man's beaten on his way from Jerusalem down to Jericho on this horribly twisted road, and multiple people pass by him and don't help him. We don't know why they didn't help him. He walks through what the scholars say, but he says, I just think maybe they were scared to help him. They were thinking about what will happen to me if I stop and help him, instead of asking the question that ought to be asked, what will happen to him if I don't stop and help him? And King calls on his audience to recognize that we have a responsibility to live, not with the question of how's this going to affect me, but with the question of how will others be affected if I fail to do ... Then at the end of the speech, he goes back to that Moses theme. And in something very profound, he says, I don't know what's going to happen. I know there are difficult days ahead. He says, but that doesn't matter now because I've been to the mountaintop. He's saying he can die knowing, like Moses, who was at the mountaintop. Moses didn't go into the promised land with the Israelites. Moses had to watch it from the mountaintop. And King says, I may not get to live to see the deliverance in the promised land, to see racial equality and justice in America. He says, but I've been to the mountaintop and I know it's going to happen. And I love that movement of faith in this speech, that we can be confident if we're living our lives to take care of others' needs, that God is going to finish the picture. And might I add, April 3rd, 1968, as he gives this speech, it's the day before April 4th, when he was assassinated. But he'd been to the mountaintop, and he was at peace with what he could do with every day God gave him. And that's why this is your video thought for the day.